So actually, with respect to India or any country, for example, third world country, you have several layers of divide. So social, political, economic. Um, then on top of it, Pippa Norris, who was also in Harvard, Oxford, uh, she talked about digital divide as a combination of all these divides, which exacerbates these divides even further. So if you look at the AI divide, it is actually even more, it will make these divides even more pronounced. Because with respect to digital divide, the idea was if you address the basic divides, then at some point of time, you can reduce the digital divide because it's actually more on the top. So if the structural divides are addressed, then something that is more superstructure can be addressed. But in the case of AI, I think both the earlier speakers are very astutely analyzed the problems in framing the issue and also the substance of the issue as well, the substratum as Arun was talking about. So now what is happening is that the paradigm is supposed to be changing, but that is not the case. But it is sold as a kind of different but the same issue. So that is where the sleight of the hand becomes very, very interesting because if you look at the business side of things, almost every decision by the governments or by the companies is driven by the business considerations. See, business is also behavior, right? We talked about behavior. Business is also behavior, but it is not the only behavior. So that is where the sleight of hand happens. See, if I say that this is purely a business model, then we can address it as such, as it is. But if I say that it is a kind of a different paradigm, that means the social, political, economic, cultural, everything changes. So as Arun was saying, you have to kind of use a square peg in a circle or whatever. So that is actually the sleight of hand because with respect to the businesses, what they try to, how they try to frame, how they try to, address or approach this issue is to make it into a system. For example, I'm in IIT, so I know how the AI plays out in the sense that whether it's mechanical engineering or management or humanities or everything is now, they want to make it into a quantity. So once you quantify everything, then everything becomes a system. But that is, as you mentioned, the lived experience or life world. So that is a basic challenge for any system. But if you frame it in such a way that everything is a system, then there is nothing outside the system. So that is where the naming and also the analysis of the substratum becomes a problem because even the term ontology used in the AI, and you know how it is used in philosophy, how it is used in sociology, or is different from how it is used in AI. Because the logic might be the same, but the assumptions, where the assumption starts, how it is derived, whether it's deductive, inductive, where it ends, where it takes you. Law also uses the same logic. The engineering also uses the same logic. Science also uses the same logic. We had a big discussion yesterday in one of the departments where the person who works on AI and IoT as an expert is saying that what you guys are doing is very subjective. So there what we are doing is very objective, in the sense that we can demonstrate, we can empirically demonstrate, all those things happen. So even if the human behavior or those things that are outside the system, if I reduce it to a system, becomes quantifiable, then everything can be solved with the help of AI and data science. So that is where it is, especially with the business, the big business takes healthcare, education, every possible industry or every possible big tech, education, big data, all these are moving towards that. And that's where we have to warn about the dangers of such reductionistic calculus. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking about the reductionistic calculus. I think we're also at a time and age where privacy regulations are atomizing the individual. So this is building forward on that. But I want to stay with the point you made, Professor Sudarshan, about how we are looking at them as systems. Now, these systems also have use cases that are meaningful, especially for the marginalized who might have a bit of a push for this start line that was way back earlier with AI. So how do we balance this? On the one hand, you have real-world benefits, but we're also worried about the exacerbation of the divide. So how do we balance these two?
So actually, that is a dilemma, because so we can't completely dismiss AI as something that is basically destructive or whatever. But my critique is only about the business model taking over the entire paradigm. So, see, for example, technology is ultimately, is a weapon that probably which anybody who is more powerful wields better. And so this is the argument that people in the education sector or healthcare sector or any sector for that matter, they are arguing that AI is actually a very good tool to augment education, healthcare, all these things. But that works mainly when the structure or the substratum or substance exists in a way that is, the ecosystem exists. But in a place like India, for example, you take a very backward state where there are not many schools or colleges or whatever, but then how does it really help? Because AI is actually the top of the line model, right? So you need to have smart boards, you need to have even smartphones. We saw the digital divide during COVID. In America, I'm not talking about India, the divide between the haves and have-nots, or like the lower class and the higher class, was 60% in America. This is documented, right? Talk about India. So you cannot, it's like a pie in the sky kind of approach doesn't work. So unless, I might be old-fashioned, but you need, unless you have the strong ecosystem in education, healthcare, then you can't catch up with America or other countries who already have that. And in US, it is struggling the last 10, 15 years. In healthcare, you saw during COVID how bad it was. Then you saw the education system. Everything is struggling because what has happened in the last 15, 20 years. So this happens in the US. But what about India, where we have been struggling? Southern states are better, doing better. But there are many states in Bihar, many places, schools are not there. So they go to actually training schools and tutorial schools, right? So that is not going to solve AI is not going to solve that problem. If you have all these things available, then AI can be used to augment. But it cannot replace the infrastructure. That is very important.
Well said. Thank you so much for that. And I'm taking away a key point here from what you shared, that it doesn't help us to add AI and stir the mix. Arun, I want to come to you. So much of what we know now as generative AI is made possible because of the intellectual property somebody has created. So I was speaking to someone from Google who was telling me that Google Translate was made possible because somebody wrote content in some language somewhere and published it online. Now, with AI making hay while the sun shines with this, there is a profit angle to it. How do we attribute credit? What does that look like? What are some of the safeguards we need to put into this side of the table?
So, AI is almost taken to be a sequitur to open source. It's not. AI is expensive. A high level of AI is not affordable to the common man. This is in the background that IP and open source are fundamentally opposed to each other. The balance, we haven't found it. We as a society have reacted by weaponizing intellectual property laws to create higher thresholds for what can be proprietary. That has been our default reaction as a society to open source development. And open source has never really found its footing in the broader economic system. That is also a given. So today when you ask a question that when I enter data, you'll have to consider what is the data. Is the data proprietary? Is it public? Is it mine? Is it an individual's? The system you enter into, is it a proprietary system? Is it an open source system? Is it a free to use system? What are the licenses running on that system? All of that is, this complex matrix is going to throw up a validation of what is the legal status of that result, which probably itself will need an AI tool to figure out because of its complexity. It is proven that every time there is a technological advancement that we see, which we have seen in our lifetime, for instance, the proliferation of the internet into our everyday lives, we have seen that IP laws, data protection laws, laws on defamation, all of those have only gotten more intensive. Because today, we as a society, especially when you're looking at capitalist or quasi-capitalist economic systems, define value by exclusion and putting a price on having access to that excluded space, whether it be a brand, whether it be technology, whether it be content. How we are going to view AI in this prism is not going to change, which means that those who have the resources will naturally seek ways and means to keep it to themselves and to put a very hefty price tag on those who want to access it. This is how I see it playing out practically.
Well said indeed. Power serves itself. And if it can find every way to do that, it will safeguard itself, indeed. Yoga Balaji, you've been working as a data scientist, and Arun talked about something that's standing out to me in the moment, where he said when we look at data, we have to ask ourselves, what is this data? Is it mine? So as a data scientist, thinking a bit about transparency, what are some of the safeguards that a data scientist could build into AI systems in a way that individuals understand that their data are being taken, what it's being taken for, so that we don't replicate this power dynamic, or at least strive not to?
So basically, when we talk about transparency in AI systems, it starts from what and how the data is used, and then how predictions are done, and then how that prediction is gonna influence the future outcomes. So there are three important phases in which we have to look at this problem. Starting from what and how data is used, when we talk practically, we don't need the individual's PAI. So what we need to know is the pattern. So we can tell or put in such a way that individual can understand contextually, saying what their particular data is being used for what purpose. For an example, I can say your browsing history is being used to give you better recommendations. So that data use visibility should be the first pillar that we need to show to any individual. And number two, how the predictions are done. Technically speaking, we have different techniques, SHAP, LIME, to understand what particular factor influenced to that prediction. So that has to be converted as a human readable signal, and that has to be shown to the user. For example, again, we can say that your credit card application is rejected due to factor X or Y or Z. And we can have a what-if mechanism in place in which user can actually enter their inputs, like how we have in cred, right? So you can forecast your credit score. So we can enter and see what is the output that we are getting. If the user feels that there is a discrepancy with the output of what-if system versus what is being predicted, they can claim for it. And the last pillar is, after prediction is done, how that prediction is going to be used. So when I say that, again, we can tell the users that your credit card application is rejected due to your CIBIL score, and you are not eligible to apply for a credit card application for next 3 months, so that the user can understand the process end to end without making them confused. And again, ultimately, transparency is not about revealing the black box completely. So it's not about showing your model or hyperparameter or the raw data. It's all about giving the clarity of what is being used, for what purpose, and how it is going to affect the user, so that we can build the trust from the users, and the AI system should act as a, it have a interpretability. Yeah.
Thank you, Yoga Balaji, and for also explaining the nuance between the difference, the difference between explainability and transparency. I'm going to take a pause here with the panel and turn it to the audience for a second. Please, with a show of hands, tell me if you have full awareness of your rights as an individual. Do you believe you have full awareness of all your human rights as an individual? Raise your hand. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of no's, including from, hey, lawyers not allowed. Okay, thanks everyone for indulging me, you too as well. Now with this is a slice of the larger ethos, and this is a question for any of you and all of you. Are we putting too heavy of an onus on the individual to be the actor or the agent here to consent or not consent? Do we as, I want to say so-called professionals, even know what we are consenting to, whether we have a right to take back our consent? I'm asking this very specifically because AI is evolving with us, whether we like it or not, is using our data, whether we like it or not. So if this pressure on the individual is not the way to go, what would you say is our alternative? And this is for any of you. No pressure. Just asking you to solve a big thing.
So I'm used to giving lectures, 3-hour lectures, so I can speak till the cows come home. Actually, once again, see, many of these framings happen at a very different level. For example, when you talk about individual rights and any group rights, so these vary with the nations, and also, for example, America, it's completely different in terms of how we see individual rights. And the Constituent Assembly debates also, that's been debated for a long time. And the due process clause there, now, Trump is basically using that due process clause and, to just run amok. And whereas in the Indian scenario, the fundamental rights as enshrined in the Constitution is, I think, more robust than, because these are also negative rights, positive rights debates also happen. But I think it's much clearer here in the Indian context. So we can think of these rights in more particular terms, whereas in the American sense, the courts interpret and depending upon which political party is there and whether they are highly conservative or moderately conservative or highly liberal, less liberal, or whatever, the interpretations differ. I think the Indian Constitution, with all the other problems, but I think the rights are much more pronounced. So I think this is going to be very important for AI when we look at AI and how rights and courts decide based on the rights. It's going to be very, very important. And as we discussed with people, the American system of American business model is where hands-off model, right? The government doesn't really bother to, and so there is, I don't know whether they have any AI policy or something. The Senate had some hearings. But Europe is extremely bureaucratic in that sense. So it is very, people call it anti-innovation or whatever. America is pro-innovation because there is absolutely no regulation. So India is seesawing between these two. When you want to look at AI and rights, individual rights, it's going to be right now the government is having a wait and watch approach. Even most of the MeitY, Ministry of Information Technology, guidelines and many of these things, there is no clear policy orientation towards regulation. They are just saying wait and watch because we don't want to stifle innovation. So that is where we are at. So AI versus rights, it's still not, if you ask me, I think we have sufficient ethical and legal basis to address those issues. But once again, when the business comes into picture, then it becomes more consequential because it becomes more utilitarian. and not deontological, because when you look at laws, laws ought to be applied. In business, that is not the case, right? Because the approach becomes much more consequential. See, I want business is for profit. The law is not for profit. Okay, so the motivation itself changes. The normative motivation and normative, what do you call? Even norm forming itself changes. How you form norms to regulate itself is, so there are going to be like lots of, as you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of discord with respect to how we are going to address this. I think my professor thing took over, so I'm talking in vague terms, but hopefully they'll be able to make sense of that. Thank you.
Professor, thank you. I'll hold on to this line you said that business is of profit but not the law. We will all parrot it irrespective of whether we believe it or not. But coming down to the right of the individual to my mind is irrelevant. Nobody asked us how the internet should be developed or how a word processor should be developed or what is an operating system or what is a web browser or what is the app ecosystem we have. Nobody's going to ask us how AI is going to be developed, right? It is going to be what is the supreme will of the individual who comes up with the system, right? And you would hope that billionaire has a conscience. If that billionaire is bereft of a conscience, he certainly has the economic wherewithal to trample regulations into a place that, if not is suitable, is not inconvenient to the development of that technology in a manner that he or she believes is appropriate in that juncture of time. Which means that given the overwhelming economic might that you see AI developers have today, the autonomy of an individual and the regard or the participation of an individual in the process can only be academic. Again, thank you, Professor. I suddenly feel I'm blessed with a conscience. Thank you.
So I'm not completely sure about the law side, as I'm talking about more technical things. So still what I understand and what I feel is that even the big giants, so they are not sure about the individual rights. So basically they are not sure about what data should we need to take from individuals and what not. When you think from the individual angle, we are also not sure what data should be given and what should not. So for an instance, right, so if I'm talking something over a call with my relative or mother or someone, in next 5 minutes, the ad will be shown up in my Instagram. How fast the mechanism is working, right? So how this data, one form of data is getting transferred as quick as possible. So what I feel is that whatever the regulations and individual rights that we talk about, it is going to be very dynamic going forward as the AI era is also going as very dynamic.
Thank you for that perspective. And also, thank you for letting us lean on the fact that none of us know what we're doing. Yes, go for it.
So actually, just had a discussion with yesterday, like with the person who works on AI and IoT. He was talking about synthetic data. If the data is not available, we can generate synthetic data. Okay, so that is not really illegal in the sense that, for example, the simulation. Simulation is actually a synthetic data. But for example, if I have to do precision agriculture, then I need data. If I develop synthetic data, how is it going to help the farmers actually? See, because it is not done here, right? Agriculture is done there. So these are the issues where appropriation of intellectual property, appropriation of knowledge, appropriation of capital, everything comes into play. And with respect to media, they are talking about synthetic media, like the AI media is synthetic media. So there are lots of questions there so about rights, and as Arun said that once people with the will decide what happens. But anyway, we are also people with the will, so we should also be able to decide in a democracy. So,
thank you for bringing that line of hope there. But in a space where not all of us know what we're doing, right? And it's a very real situation. Even the black box has not been understood by folks in the profession. We are continuing to build AI systems that make decisions for us, whether it is a credit score or military AI which decides who to target. Now we are here, and maybe to some it's a point of return that has been reached. There's no looking back. How do we make systems fail safely and not catastrophically then? Is that what we should be looking at all?
Yeah, I think this is very interesting question, and which everyone in the current industry is chasing about. So when we say that the system should fail safely, so there are mainly few criteria. So it should act under how it is acting under uncertainty, how it is acting under edge cases, how it is acting under when there is a real-time changes. So most of the time, the AI system fails catastrophically because whatever it learned in the training data versus whatever is happening in the real time. If there is any data distribution changes or is any pattern changes, because imagine if we develop a AI system 5 years back and using it now, things have changed, right? So it is gonna fail for sure. So we have to have a methodology in place in order to make sure that the system should fail safely. So the main thing is context-aware validation. The first and foremost thing that I would say is context-aware validation. Here, the validation must go beyond accuracy. Basically, the use case-based validation should be there. For an example, if I'm working with a use case in which I have to flag customers as low risk, high risk, and medium risk based on their health, I'm allowed to flag non-high risk customers as high risk customers, but I'm not allowed to flag high risk customers as non-high risk customers because that is going to be very riskier for me. So that kind of understanding based on the use case should be developed. That is point number one. And number two is uncertainty aware validation. Let's say we have to develop an AI system in such a way that if the system is not sure about the result that it's going to deliver, it has to trigger a human in loop pipeline in which humans should look at the results, especially when the impact is gonna be high. And again, there are other technical things like stress validation, out of distribution catching, and everything is there. But fundamentally, after all this, if we do all this, as the era is changing, the rate at which the industry is changing, we should have a regulatory audits or regulatory validations to make sure that our systems are failing safely.
A meaningful case for the human in the loop. Thank you, Yoga Balaji. Professor Sudarshan, I want to stay with the idea of impact a bit more. You've built a Rawlsian analysis model that looks at distribution, especially of access. How do we lean on that model? If you could share a bit about that model and what it can bring to the distribution of the benefits of AI, while also recognizing that distribution of harm is also happening on the side.
So, because we looked at three different aspects. One is the individual aspect, which is the Rawlsian model, because the emphasis on individual is highly American. So we used John Rawls, who's an American political theorist, who talks about all else being equal, the least advantage should be given preference. Especially even in America, especially in the public institutions and even other institutions. For example, in the advertisement, you'll see equal opportunity affirmative action / affirmative action. See, unlike India, how it works in America is that if all else being equal, then the least advantage is given some kind of help. Like, so AA is affirmative action / EO is equal opportunity. So that is how it is seen. Then the next level we looked at is actually Amartya Sen's capability approach. For example, we have all these laws and rights and everything else, but are these translatable into actuality? So that is a major issue. That's where institutions need to be there. For example, education institutions, healthcare, all these basic institutions after modernity, like the public sphere, civil society. So the emphasis shifted from the feudal system into much more public, modern public sphere. That is the next level is capability approach. Amartya Sen very clearly says that just because you have laws, just because you have rights, they don't translate into real good. So good has to be achieved, good has to be facilitated. So that is where Amartya Sen's capability approach also comes into picture. It applies in economics, applies in social, political, everywhere. Even for AI, digital divide also we have used that. And the third aspect is actually the group inequalities. For example, many countries, Africa, India, many countries where there is group inequality, it's called horizontal inequality, because if you look at the economic inequality, it is vertical inequality. And in the case of group inequality, is horizontal inequality. So we address the digital divide issue also based on these three issues. And I'm also using the same lens, same framework to address the AI divide, because AI divide is actually going to be even faster in terms of digital divide took long time. And we have kind of been slightly more successful in addressing the digital divide. But by integrating the ICT revolution along with the existing institutions, schools, healthcare, and many other things. But in the case of AI, the development is extremely, what I would say, independent, as Arun was also mentioning. So in that sense, unless we have a very clear legal and ethical basis for regulation, as Balaji was also mentioning, it's going to completely take over or lead us astray. That is the issue, because ultimately even the regulations are going to be so tenuous. Because if you look at the DPDP, what is that, the data protection law, who is responsible ultimately? They talk about responsible AI, because I am part of the Center of Responsible AI as well. Who is responsible? That is very difficult to fix. So because if you look at the traditional notions of responsibility, in law or philosophy or anything for that matter, it is actually, I know about the consequences, I'm aware of the consequences, I'm motivated to act in such a way. I also have the intention of acting in such a way. But in the AI, there is none of these things are actually, we can fix irresponsibility. So that is where the challenge is. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sudarshan, for that important reminder of responsibility. Speaking about responsibility, a little bit of a deviation. Arun, one of the questions people have consistently come up with is AI coming after my job. As a person who unwittingly trained 2 AI tools that eventually replaced me, I find this is a very real challenge. We do have workers' expertise, skill, knowledge, creativity, innovation. All of this goes into making work and employment what it is. But is there such a thing as occupational knowledge within the scope of IPR? And is AI inviting us to explore that dynamic and set a meaningful safeguard for employees?
That's an impossible concept. What you're assuming is that a human's ability has an intrinsic economic value that nonetheless has to be protected, even if AI is capable of doing it, and the human must be compensated for it. This, as you know, is disastrous to all forms of capitalist thinking, right? To my mind, the only bit of employment that is possibly not directly influenced by AI is straight up manual labor, right? Somebody still has to go and plow the fields and dig our roads and put up buildings. Somebody still has to do it. Manual labor is still relatively unaffected at this stage by AI, but I'm sure you'll see an hardware integration with AI that is going to that's going to push industrial application to the next level. We still don't see the integration at a very advanced stage, but I'm sure we'll see it in the near future. Which means you have to get with it, or you're going to get lost. You have to figure out how you are going to incorporate AI, how you will validate it, how you can use it, how you can improve on it, and how or you can possibly contribute to it. Right? When our engineers stopped building roads, they started writing code, right? They'll possibly today contribute to developing AI. No, but human effort will go somewhere. And I believe that today that effort is going to go towards, in some way, integrating or contributing or being the back office to AI.
So I'm going to, Arun, not just yet. One more question for you. So let's change the dynamic a bit. Not an employee, but a creative artist,
Right.
a singer,
Right.
a writer, a theater artist. They are producing as well with their
Yes.
intellect. That is also labor. Does this change things?
So to my mind, the most unfortunate development with all of this, which is really the societal impact for creators of AI, is that so much of your ability to be recognized will depend on your access to AI systems and your sophistication in understanding it, right? Now, if I were to enter into an AI tool that give me a contemporary sequel to Pride and Prejudice in a contemporary setting, should that be copyrighted? I don't know. If I were to draw the sun rising and ask a AI tool, can you, like Starry Nights, make sunny days as per Van Gogh? Is that worth protecting? I don't know. This is a conversation that me and Mr. Sridevan, whom you'll hear later, have been having. So much of it comes down to disclosure requirements. You being a good boy, coming and saying that, hang on, I've used AI, but this has been my human participation and hence I deserve IP. See, you have Balaji, you have Professor, they're genuinely intelligent people. You might be very suspicious that everything I am talking today is possibly inputs given to me by AI, right? It might be that in my screen right now, AI is popping up the responses I should be giving. How do you validate it? I'm not going to tell you. I would like to pretend that it is all me. I hope everyone believes it. But these disclosure requirements are so premised on human ethics, I have my own reservations about it. So therefore, for content creators, a massively challenging time.
Thank you for naming that and for the fact that it all really ultimately boils down to us, our behaviors, our mindsets. So be that as it may, as diverse communities of people, I'm moving to my last question, and this is for all three of you. From your seat at the table, what is one key takeaway that you want regulation to pay attention to from the perspective of rights?
See, I've been on several panels, media, business. See, there is a general principle of ethics. See, that's what everybody follows, business or law or teaching or anything. Then there is the particular or more localized understanding of, I'm using a very AI term, localized or whatever. So the problem is when the businesses say that this localization is actually what the general is. It's a logical problem also, but also it affects ethics, it affects politics, it affects every aspect of our life. So this is where the emphasis needs to be changed. For example, the policy has to be general in nature. It cannot be tailored to AI business or what the businesses are doing, because it affects energy, it affects climate, it affects agriculture, it affects law, it affects everything, teaching, or it affects everything. So when the general becomes particular, that is a problem. And now particular becomes the general, that's also a problem. So like whether it ethics or law, the policy has to be at the general level. So that means fundamentals are still the same. Thou shalt not steal has not changed because of AI. Thou shalt not lie has not changed because of AI. Thou shalt not kill has not changed because of AI. So the sleight of the hand that the business, actually big business and many businesses are doing, business techs are doing, is that they are saying that ethics has changed because of this. Ethics has not changed because of AI. The application, the applied ethics has changed, but the ethics has not changed. So this is a sleight of hand we have to be very wary of, actually.
Actually, particular to what Professor has shared, right? So when the general becomes particular. So what I am mostly concerned about it is the companies who are having an AI system, they are claiming that they are not using the PAI information of users. They can call it, anonymization, encryption, or whatever it is. But with the additional details, with the pattern, I can again remap it to the individual. So most of us might have watched this movie called Winner, in which Vadivelu enters into a house and something he does. So basically, the conversation flows like this. The one asks, அவன் பார்க்க எப்படி இருந்தான், பார்க்க ரொம்ப கருப்பா இருந்தான். The next moment, instantly, the other one says, it's கைப்புல்ல. Basically, when the pattern and the additional detail exists, right, you can still map it to the individual. Now, nobody is asking how this is happening in black box, in behind the scene. So I strongly feel that even when the companies claim that they are not utilizing our data or PA information specifically, is it really the case? That is something I'm concerned about.
My concern is twofold. I think it's an absolute that the reaction of law and regulations is always very severe and viewed with circumspection when it comes to any technological advancement. And that's not even accounting for a paradigm shift such as what AI is doing today. Take, for instance, courts have consistently started granting injunctions saying that you will not use a person's face or likeness in an AI tool. And these are very omnibus orders because there is a fear that these will only be used for something that is negative. But take, for instance, if you're a cartoonist today, you don't have to do pencil drawings. You can come up with, using AI, with a very real approximation of that very same cartoon, right? But you would be in breach of a court's order. Because it doesn't take into concepts such as parody or criticism or representations, which are very different from what was done in the past, where the tools and the modes of communication were extremely different, right? And the reason for this reaction is that the law is often very premised on the extremes. What the judges see, they see that somebody who had gone through a digital arrest, right? But that's fine. The first 10 people who went through a digital arrest, the law will be sympathetic. The 11th person, the law can't protect, right? It's like if you still receive an email saying, I'm a Nigerian prince, send me $1,000, I will give you $1 million. Why should the law protect you? Right? But we still premise on that extreme as the basis of the reaction of the law. We have to move beyond that. As harsh as it sounds, the law is never going to protect those who are willfully ignorant or who turn a blind eye to what is happening around them. Right? Which means that the law will have to calibrate and soften its response to accommodate expressions of individual using AI, because this, if not already, will become the default mode of expression. So I believe that the law has to move on from viewing AI as a mode for possibly doing deep fakes or obscene material or for scamming people. Yes, that is the first expression of it, and naturally, once given a tool, the first thing we as a human race will be do is to abuse it. We have seen the abuse, build in the safeguards, but thereafter allow it to do what it has to do and hopefully advance human growth and take us to a different era of technology.
Beautifully put. Thank you so much for that note of turning it back to us as individuals to start from a place of reflection. This panel actually comes at the heels of an interesting development where the Bombay High Court recently extended Article 21, which speaks to the right to life, to your digital personality as well. So there's lots that's coming in this space, I imagine. There's lots of interesting insights.
No, but then if you're a celebrity, you have to bear the brunt for it, right? Today, the court gives you an omnibus protection saying you cannot be used anywhere. Whereas for 5 centuries, we have said if you are a celebrity, have a thick skin. Today, why? But you've been given global injunctions like candy, and that completely undoes what is centuries of jurisprudential thinking. So I take a very skeptical view to orders of these because they really don't accommodate for the history of safeguards and caveats and exceptions that we as a system have put up, and we automatically embrace AI by saying we'll give you an omnibus injunction. I don't think that by any measure would be a calibrated or a fitting response.
Absolutely, and I think what you say also speaks to the point of avoiding just replicating a framework elsewhere because it worked well there, and instead to pay attention to the social history, to the lived realities on ground. Thank you for that point. So this panel I will now bring to a close. Thank you so much, Yoga Balaji, Arun, and Professor Sudarshan. Your insights were absolutely valuable. Following this, we will have panels that will look at regulation as a concept in itself, but the invitation before I say goodbye is for us to reflect on ourselves as consumers of AI, as active agents who are also feeding into the development of AI, whether we like it or not. What can we do from our side to start with educating ourselves, reflect, and perhaps even look to what aspects of our mindsets need to change if we expect the system to walk alongside us. Thank you everyone for a patient ear, and thank you Team Beritum for the opportunity to do this.
Thank you, Kirti, and thank you to all the panelists for the perspectives which you have brought today. Please join me in giving our panelists a warm round of applause. And before moving on, I'd like to call upon the panelists in front of the table if we can have a picture. And I would like to call Mr. Karthik Jayakumar, our founding partners of Beritum Partners, to hand over a few mementos in their honor. Thank you. Up next is our second fireside chat, where we shift gears from enterprise adoption and societal impact into the governance question: what AI means for the law and what the law must become in response. I request on stage Adil and Mr. Srinath Sridevan. Oh, sure. Hosting this conversation is Adil Karimboy, partner leading the technology and data privacy practice at Peritum Partners. Joining him is Mr. Srinath Sridevan, designated senior advocate at the High Court of Madras. After 27 years at the bar, with a rare mix of international legal pedigree and a deep engagement with technology law, he graduated with a gold medal from Madras Law College and completed his LLM at the New York University. Practiced at Allen and Overy in London and then returned to Chennai. His recent work places him at the forefront of technology and data protection jurisprudence in India, including representing a cybersecurity researcher in the Star Health data breach matter, one of India's largest incidents affecting 31 million customers. He has also been appointed amicus curiae by the Madras High Court on landmark questions concerning digital privacy, electronic evidence under India's new evidence law, and he has written thoughtfully on the global AI regulatory race and the need for international governance framework. Please welcome Adil Karimboy and Mr. Srinath Sridevan. Adil, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Firstly, sir, thank you for having us and taking the opportunity to actually speak about this very important juncture in humanity, actually. I'd like to actually break up our conversation into primarily two segments. I'd like to, one, talk to you about your own personal experience in the legal system and understand how AI is actually changing it for the better, for the worse. And through the second leg of our conversation, I'd like to actually speak about the more abstract matter of how we deal with this new change and the benefits that we could potentially uncover using tool as a regulation as a tool, excuse me. So the first thing that I thought we'd really talk about is AI's promise for the legal segment in large, the system and the benefits that it stands to actually receive from it. And I think that conversation's kind of broken up into a few legs. And I think maybe the first one that we can really start with is the judiciary. What are your thoughts, sir? What's your experience on that?
Thanks, Adil. I was here about 3 months ago, same auditorium, and I was delivering a talk on AI to a bunch of all the government law students across the state. And in the course of my conversations with the various stakeholders who were there, one thing which became very clear is that how AI is going to integrate itself into the judiciary is going to vary based on the generation. Okay, so for my generation, the boomers, as we call ourselves, it starts off as a toy. Okay, so ChatGPT is a fun thing. You ask it some silly question, it gives you a silly answer. But if you approach it more with a greater degree of nuance, you will see that AI holds a great degree of promise at two levels. First, in India's curse is the glacial speed of the judiciary. And what AI holds a promise for in regard to this is the ability to intelligently categorize cases so that large volumes of cases raising common questions are disposed of together. And also, secondly, to weed out completely useless cases. I mean, a case where no steps have been taken for years. Interestingly, these were the recommendations that I'm part of the task force for the Madras High Court. And these were two of the recommendations that we gave, where we are trying to harness the power of AI to parse through the large volumes of data, which are the cases filed on a day-to-day basis, and identifying issues of commonality, clubbing them together so that you can have common questions decided together. That's the first thing. And second thing is to weed out cases, where everyone died 25 years ago and the case is still pending, stuff like that. So I think the foremost contribution which AI can give to the judiciary in the immediate, in the next, let's say, 6 months to 1 year, is assistance in expediting disposal.
That's really interesting because I think the biggest stand for change that probably the Indian judiciary needs is a tool to improve its efficiency. And that kind of brings me to my next question on the subject in how do you ensure that this is not going to be a tool that's used to disregard cases that potentially need to be heard? I know the Supreme Court has written a white paper about keeping a human in the loop. Could you tell us where you see that stand and whether that's a risk?
Okay, this is a great point. It's something we are grappling with. I heard Professor Sudarshan in the previous panel. I mean, their understanding is far more advanced than us, but I'll just give you practically how we are facing it right now. Most people here are not lawyers, I'm assuming. So whenever you decide to file a case, there's a bunch of papers you need to file. And before you get a hearing, it goes through a process of scrutiny where a bunch of people, bureaucrats, check if the papers are in accordance with a specified set of rules. And it can take you from between 24 hours to maybe 3 months to get a hearing. One thing which Karnataka and Kerala have already done and which Madras is going to be implementing within the next 3 months is a process by which that is automated. AI will scrutinize your papers, and it will, as you file them, you will instantly get the response on whether it's fit for hearing or not. Now, to answer your question, just as in life, so in law, sometimes there will be a specific rule that works in injustice, a rule of scrutiny of a document, for example. And the AI is going to follow that rule and say that, look, your document cannot be placed before the court because this rule prohibits it. What the rules, the upcoming rules are going to say is that if a lawyer feels that his is a special case, he can mark it up for human scrutiny. And so that's one example of how the human in the loop is going to be retained. But stepping back to what I said earlier, the judicial determination is still going to be only by humans. AI is going to be like a servile assistant which, brings together cases or highlights issues which have already been decided so that there is greater efficiency in decision making.
I think my next question, which kind of naturally gravitates to the other side, we've spoken about the bench and perhaps we speak about the bar and who it represents. We see a lot of people kind of resorting to AI, one, for legal advice, and two, lawyers starting to resort to AI for a multitude of reasons. How do you see this paradigm sort of shape up, and what are your thoughts on it?
That's, okay, how I see it shaping up is in two ways. The wealthier lawyers will have access to more sophisticated AI systems which enable them to give a better quality of service to their litigants. The poorer lawyers either will not have access to AI or will have access to ChatGPT, and it'll be something as, please draft a letter seeking permission to do this, that, and the other. Something that Arun and Professor spoke about in the previous panel, which is the digital divide in terms of the legal profession, is something which is going to come out. Again, as part of the AI task force, we have recently sent a set of rules by way of recommendations to the Bar Council of India, where if the Bar Council of India accepts our recommendations, lawyers who use AI to generate a work product will be required to disclose and give clients an opt-out. So a client can say that, look, I want mine only touched by humans and not by AI, and that's something which we can provide for. We're also trying to bring in rules very similar to Singapore, where if you generate hallucinated case laws, it's going to be treated as a misconduct. So again, the digital divide is going to play a huge role because poorer lawyers are going to use less sophisticated AI systems, which are going to ergo uh, the propensity to hallucinate will be more, at least as things stand at present. Whereas a large law firm will use something like maybe Harvey and will be able to give a higher quality of work product.
Just before we move on to the next segment, quickly your thoughts on the common person using it, a non-lawyer. Do you think it's a good access to justice? Is it a good access to legal advice without the cost involved? Will it improve access to justice?
It depends on each and every person. Before AI came along with ability to provide legal advice, who here hasn't Googled, my knee is paining, what should I do? And Google invariably will say, you're going to live 3 more days. And, and we'll have nightmares for the rest of the next 3 days. Similar to legal advice, you have to, it's great, it gives you, AI is very good to give you a range of options, but if you're going to take that as legal advice, I mean, you run the risk of making a big mistake.
Absolutely. I think that's something that resonates across the legal practice at this moment. So I have 2 practical implications that touch upon the current state of law for AI. I think the first one that we should probably talk about is with respect to the India AI guidelines that came out recently. It recommends a multi-sectoral approach, meaning that there are going to be multiple regulators that kind of oversee this space as it grows. One thing that kind of came to my mind as I read the paper was what happens when there is a multi-area dispute that arises. So say, for instance, you have a medical insurance case. You all of a sudden have regulators from the medical space, you have the insurance space, you have MITI who regulates data. How does an investigation and, how does the discovery for that kind of a case actually take place? Who leads it? If there's multiple views from regulators, how does that kind of work out?
To answer you very briefly, it doesn't work. It breaks down. The Indian system is unfortunately top-down. That's the one thing of our colonial past we've preserved with great sanctity. And that is, and the breakage of that system is something we see across all verticals in our lives. One thing which I have been advocating for, at least in terms of AI, is a self-governance, a self-governed ecosystem with just the guardrails built by the law. In the example you're speaking of, where a single complaint attracts multiple regulators, everyone is in a race to show how they can wield their power in a specific circumstance. And it never ends well for anyone concerned. And the effect of this is something which you will see permeating all of Indian society, which is that the higher you are, the less you're likely to be touched by laws, and the lower you are, the more you'll be hammered by all the laws. And that's something which is going to happen if you allow multiple regulation, especially in the AI space.
Agree. I think it's a space that we'll sort of see unfold, hopefully positively, interestingly, not so negatively. I think the other one that kind of glares, and I think Arun C. Mohan sir touched upon this earlier in the day, the IPR problem with this space is a complicated one. So we won't talk too much about it maybe today. But we're looking at a paradigm where AI is being given free hand to train, effectively imbibing the works of others. But we're also starting to see people who've created using AI not allowed to actually establish themselves as owners of the property. How does that balance kind of work going forward? What is the system kind of going to need to make sense again?
I think, as Arun said, this is an ongoing debate, not just in India, everywhere in the world. Now, if you start giving protection to AI-generated assets, all right, what you will very quickly find is that the rich will get much richer very quickly. There will be some moderate amounts of protection for intermediate level players, but the poor will get very poor very quickly. Some of the billionaires have said that, like including Elon Musk, have said that let's abolish IPR completely, which also works well in an unregulated space, because then it's the Wild West. You know, anyone can copy anyone and make what they want. Now, our problem today is this. Sitting in India, we hear these Western voices speak in different tongues, but what's the impact going to be on each of us? And I think somewhere we are losing sight of the fact that most intellectual property protection is going to result in hyper-capitalization. And that's my personal view. Of course, I may be wrong, but in the short and medium run, I think India would be better served by less IPR protection of AI-generated property.
Interesting. So, as we segue into our next segment, I recall a piece of writing that you made about the Eastern approach to regulating AI. I think the RBI started with, imbibing this sort of approach, and it sort of made its way into the IT governance side of things as well. Help us understand where this kind of fits in today. A theory which has existed, it's not original to me, of course, it's something which I read elsewhere, is that the Western approach to society is entirely individualistic and individually deterministic, which means that the focus is on what an individual can do, and if he achieves something, how the law protects it, or how the law prevents him or her from doing something which the law considers to be bad. Whereas traditionally, I say traditionally because our laws changed during the period of our colonization. Traditionally, our laws have been collective in nature, collectivistic in nature, and societal in nature. Of course, you had a king, and the king generally ran the kingdom, but the villages just did their own thing. Nobody really cared about the laws that the king was passing back in his kingdom. You pay your taxes and you do your own thing. And this has been our outlook traditionally. Now, if you take a look at how, if we follow the EU model, for example, and I think Yoga Balaji was talking about that. If we take the EU model, it focuses on individual acts, it focuses on risk levels, they've created this risk pyramid, and they talk of consequences for each thing. Now, we have seen how in India repeatedly these kinds of laws just don't work. Okay, so for example, if I tell someone, hey, listen, that's a one-way road. I mean, there'll be two people saying, but no one way after 10 p.m. And it's just our Indian way to, you create a rule, there'll be an exception to it. And therefore, if we adopt these models, you're going to find that it's going to repeatedly fail. Therefore, when I was studying the Japanese and the Chinese regulations, I found that possibly the Indian soil would be more receptive to that system of regulation. And that's what I kind of advocated. And I was very pleased to see that the RBI has taken that path in its Seven Sutra method, where I'm just going to take a small diversion because it's very important. One thing which we observed, and this is something which I observed in multiple conversations with bankers, is that if you look at loan processing, and Yoga Balaji was talking about it, you will find that the rejection rates for certain groups, loan rejection rates for certain groups, is significantly higher. And you may say that, hey, listen, it correlates with that, the income profile of that group. It's possible. But what we did find was that the correlation between social group and loan rejection rate was there. That was evident. And therefore,
the US model or the Western model would be to say, thou shalt not reject loan on the basis of social group or something like that. And that will never work in India. So the RBI has come out with this wonderful thing where the onus is on the bank to ensure transparency, fairness, customer centricity. It's 7 steps. And it came out in July. And so and so far it seems to be working, but only time will tell. It's a good way of showing how Eastern way or the Oriental way of thinking may work better in terms of an ethical approach to AI.
It's interesting, and I think that kind of brings me to a question that I've had for some time. A lot of people are talking about AI being a catalyst for consolidation of power, and I think that we've touched upon that in this conversation and through the course of the day as well. And I'm just thinking out loud, what are the solutions to this kind of a problem? How do we actually start to address it head on?
Let's just take a step back, okay? So if you look at, for example, the 60s, you had metal workers. Metal workers were replaced when presses came into factories and they were able to automatedly press sheets of metal. So a whole group of people went out, but this resulted in people who had access to pressing machines generating greater wealth. Then you had computers. People who had access to computers were able to generate wealth faster than people who still relied on manual systems of accounting or computing. Now, the only way in which you can prevent AI being a tool for concentration of wealth or an instrument or catalyst for concentration of wealth is if AI systems are made accessible to all persons across income strata. In Tamil Nadu, you have these e-mayams across the state. They are not adequately equipped to provide any kind of service to anyone. But I'm assuming that some kind of a delivery system which provides access to systems which give systems which have AI-based algorithms running on them, systems which will help the participants identify if AI is being used in the interactions with them, and 3, systems which will enable the user to identify what kind of algorithm they can use to greater advance whatever it is that they're looking for. If these 3 are there, then you'll see a democratization of AI systems, which may, to some degree, prevent the concentration of capital.
I think that's actually really interesting because it's something that's been on my mind kind of consistently is that we do need to start looking at regulation from a staggered manner. We do need to actually start thinking about how we approach this problem in stages because it's so rapidly developing. And one of the things that kind of came to mind a lot was what if we built a system that started with a degree of transparency, making sure that companies that consolidate the power today are more transparent with their practices, are able to kind of cater to people in a fashion that is, educating their choices, one, allowing enterprises to kind of imbibe what they need, don't need, what the risks from sort of inculcating a foundational model would be. Would this sort of an approach, this sort of a foundation lay a good ground to scale regulation a lot better? Because I know we talked about transparency in, say, the legal practice as well.
Ideally, that would work extremely well. Ideally, it would work extremely well. I'll give you one real life example of how it could work. Now, recently, in the month of September, the central government wanted to roll out a new law of registration for the whole country. And so the Department of Land Reforms was tasked with this, and they wanted to use AI systems for the purpose of land records, identification, and transparent systems of documentation. And so I was invited to advise on that. And so one of the things I said is, look, we have all these documents in place, and we have land records going back hundreds of years, and so we can bring in transparency by, introducing these into the forthcoming registration models. And the secretary told me, sir, are you aware of the land laws of Chhattisgarh? So I said, no, I'm aware of southern 4 states and Maharashtra. And so it's very sophisticated. He said in Chhattisgarh, for an entire village, the only land document is the village headman's NOC. So how do we work with that? So I said, then it'll fail. So the transparency has to go hand in hand with sophistication. And unless there is a basic level of sophistication, there's no point in compelling transparency, because you will only get to know more about what you already know. But I agree, I'm not saying I disagree with you, I'm just saying that in already sophisticated systems, a self-regulated, transparency-based model will work wonderfully. And to that extent, I definitely agree with you.
So I was also thinking about this through, what kind of muscle power does India actually have today to kind of impose that kind of system? And one of the things that kept coming to mind is how prominently the big LLMs of the world, the OpenAIs of the world, have called out to India as a really important market because of the data. So does it make sense, and are we in a position today to actually use this market advantage to our favor and call it a regulatory asset, to actually bring more negotiating power to the table effectively?
That's a great idea. It's something which China has already done. So for example, in China, I've only read the English translation, so pardon me if I'm incorrect about something, but the English translation of their AI regulations, how it proceeds is that they have certain core values, and every AI system has to ensure that it neither directly nor indirectly violates or permits the violation of the core value. And when it says indirectly, it says if this AI system interacts with another AI system and that AI system violates it, the system has to highlight it. And the core values include loyalty to the party. So, that's awesome if we could have something appropriately similar for India, but loyalty to the party won't work here. But I'm just saying that that's exactly what you're saying. What you're saying is what they're miles ahead. Then the regulations are, and because it's an extraordinarily powerful market, everyone's falling in line. So you're right. If we are important enough, if our population is something that the big players want to get at, then we should have the regulatory will and the regulatory ability to lay down the lines, the clear lines that these are the core values that any system wishing to operate in India must adhere to. As to what those core values will be is something which will be a matter of much debate, I assume. But yes, to that extent, we could do it.
That serves as a really great introduction to our next panel on governance. But before we wind up, sir, I have one primary question to ask you. If we could make one rule, one regulation, not a principle, effective today to address AI and its various harms, its benefits, its risks, what would you personally kind of opt for?
If you gave me a magic wand and I could wave it at the government, I would want the government to mandate, I mean, since most people access IT systems through their mobile phones, mandate every operating system on every phone and every computer to flag immediately where data is being processed through an AI algorithm, flag it to the user, give him or her the opt-out option, or give them the controls on how they wish to proceed further with it, so that we will know when indoctrination is happening, and we will be able to prevent it if we wish to, or go with the tide.
I think that's really interesting because we've seen a polarization in opinions today as to whether people really, are bothered by the fact that AI is or isn't processing their information and opinions. So giving the choice to the people just seems to make a lot of sense.
Yes. So again, most people here, I assume, are younger than me. My generation, we saw something called the MTV wave, when the indoctrination which happened was, we started thinking certain things are cool. We started thinking certain things were desirable. It was almost like a collective drift towards a particular kind of ideal. AI, simply because of the social patterns underlying the LLMs on which they are built, has the potential to, through a process of osmosis, introduce the same cultural biases of the LLMs on which they are built into whichever society uses it. So yeah, so that's my big fear.
I think that's a really interesting thought, actually. The cultural influences of a Western-trained model are...
Yes.
Can't put it to words. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that thought-provoking
Thank you so
discussion.
much.
Thank you. Thank you, Adil and Mr. Srinath Sridevan, for such a clear and insightful perspective, as well as the use of AI in judiciary and how advocates can effectively utilize AI in their practice. Before moving on, I'd like to call upon stage Durga to please present a memento as well as have a picture. Thank you. Sure. Oh, sure.
Hi, we'll resume with the next session in about 5 minutes. Thank you. We'll now take that conversation one step further, from principles to choices. Our final session is regulatory and governance, building the guardrails, architecting India's AI-ready legal, regulatory, and governance framework. The goal here is to move past a wait-and-see approach and get into the concrete questions India needs to answer. What regulatory model fits us? Hard law, soft law, sectoral rules, or a hybrid, where liability should sit where AI causes harm, how to think about cross-border data flows and localization, what transparency and algorithmic audit mechanisms could realistically work, and how IP should be treated, ownership, training data, and fair use. Moderating this panel is Adil Karimboy, and joining him are Mr. Tariq Akbar, co-CEO at Legally Solutions, leading cutting-edge legal tech distribution across 4 continents. With 30+ years of experience spanning legal AI solutions, venture capital, and real estate, he focuses on building high-value technology that drives sustainable growth. He's also a venture partner at Dallas Venture Capital, bringing a founder-first perspective shaped by working with startups, MSMEs, and Fortune 500 companies. And beyond work, he's even active in food technology as a board member at Fauzia's Cooking, focused on locally sourced natural products. We then have Mr. Devrat Vaishnav, Assistant Manager at the India AI Mission and a Fellow at the Secure AI Future Labs, an AI governance and policy specialist with experience in AI strategy, data governance, and developing governance and safety mechanisms. He has delivered lectures on AI law, pursued advanced specialization in European IP and IT law at the University of Göttingen, and holds multiple certifications in AI governance and safety. His work includes research policy, policy engagement, and capacity building for responsible AI deployment, especially relevant for policymakers and innovators preparing for the EU AI Act era. We also have Mrs. Archana Dinakaran, VP and Head of Legal and Compliance at Integra Software Services. With 15+ years across litigation and the IT service sector, she brings a strong in-house cross-jurisdictional contracts and strategy lens and a governance by design approach, embedding accountability, transparency, and risk allocation upstream through contracts, operating models, and decision frameworks. Based in Pondicherry, she's also a global champion with AI Ignite Women, advancing women's leadership in responsible AI, bringing a grounded reminder that effective AI governance is as much about people as it is about technology. Over to you, Adil.
Thank you, Anjali. So our mission today, through the course of this panel, is to talk about where we stand today, to sum up what we've spoken about when we look at corporate interests, what we look at when we spoke about individualistic interests, and try and come together to understand where we should go with this regulatory framework that we're potentially looking at. Should we be more lax? Should we be more strict? Should we advocate for something that grows and changes and evolves to accommodate the new world? So I'll start our conversation by introducing some of our panelists and giving them an opportunity to kind of segue themselves as well. Devrat, you're a policy expert on the panel. You've worked with regulatory bodies for a while now. Give us an understanding of where regulation stands today and the India AI guidelines, if you'd like.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Before we start, I have to just say this. I'm not like representing any government agency here. I'm representing Secure AI Futures Lab. Sorry, I had to say this because of some bureaucratic rule. Now, I'll start like, okay, I'm Devrat. I think my introduction has already been given 2 times. So right now, what India AI governance landscape looks like is, as the Indian government has already cleared their stance that they will be adopting a techno-legal approach. Basically, will not be enacting any separate AI act as done by the European Union to regulate artificial intelligence system in India. Instead of that, we are giving power to various specific agencies to rule AI-related functions as per their own domain. For example, RBI is like making AI governance framework for financial transaction. SEBI is making AI governance framework for security exchange, basically. So this is what Indian government is currently doing. It may change in the next couple of years as AI is rapidly evolving.
That was really helpful and helps us, understand the perspective of a multi-sectoral approach to regulation in this space. So, Tariq, you've been, running and leading an organization that builds in a regulated space today. I'd like to kind of understand where you stand in, and how that kind of impacts your journey. How does regulation really affect product building, and what should we be aware of when we're discussing regulation?
Hello everybody, but, where I'd really come from is, I'm an engineer, so I'm going to, bring an engineering perspective to things, right? And, you have a balance between innovation and regulation. And I think innovation is extremely important at this point in time. I think it's important for us to move innovation forward, make advances, explore the tech for what its potential is. You have standard regulations that really can be applied de facto to the emerging tech that's happening right now, whether it's privacy laws, whether it's data security. These are things that are already in place. And I think those are things that are straightforward that can be applied to the tech right now, but not really limiting its advancement. So tech has to run, innovation has to run fast. And we really, as a country, really need to keep up at global standards in terms of making sure that the innovation that's happening here in India is at the level that global innovation is continuing to grow. So that is a standard, and that's got to be, the push. Now, where do regulations help us is really protecting both our corporations and the individuals based on the data privacy and the information security acts that are already in place, and making sure that those are being implemented.
Interesting. I think the innovation over restraint principle that we've been talking about seems to really resonate, and that's quite helpful to actually understand. Archana, you've operated in a space that meets product and regulation for some time now. How has that journey been for you, and how do you see the journey ahead?
I think what is happening right now is, see, I am an in-house lawyer by and large. So I come from the perspective of, I need to balance between what a company and an enterprise needs to do, because we're all here for profit. At the same time, I also want to be able to help organizations balance out the risks or harms, be aware of where we are going right from the beginning, right? So even on this panel, I am trying to be the bridge between the regulator and the founder who says innovation on one side and who stands for the regulation here. So this is how I see my persona on this panel.
That's helpful, and I think that really brings us to the subjects that we decided to speak about today. Now, I think the first question that I kind of want to go into with each of y'all is, how do we actually incentivize or use India's benefits to its advantage, and also touch upon perhaps what its challenges are on the road ahead? So, Devnath, my first questions to you. Innovation over restraint is something we've spoken about, and there's a reason for this, I'm sure. But I'd like to actually understand what India's current limitations are and where we actually need to build capacity. What are your thoughts?
So I think as of now, we already know that India is lacking behind in AI development and deployment, right? If we compare India to US or China, we are already behind. And in terms of AI resources as well, right? The good foundation models or the hardware that is required, like AI chips, semiconductors, we really don't have access to those kind of things. So if we increase the regulations way too much, right, it will be hard for the company to like do these compliances. They have to spend extra money to hire these lawyers, compliance experts, basically. So it's going to hurt India AI ecosystem, basically the startups, right? But at the same time, if we don't like enact any regulation, if we like leave it blank, then obviously we are looking for dangerous outcomes, right? Because in India, we already know that people, they don't really, people don't take their privacy rights seriously. I mean, how many of us are aware that, okay, what kind of content I am being shown towards in social media, basically, right? Why that content is being shown to me, who is behind that content. So I think like we have to find a balance between like innovation, safety, and this is where restraint comes, basically.
I think that's interesting because the regulatory scenario currently, when we're specifically discussing the India governance, AI governance guidelines, is to wait and watch effectively. Do you agree with that? Yeah? Is there a better balance according to you? Do you think we can do it a little bit better? Is there areas that we can improve?
Yeah. Basically, Indian government is, they have made plans like short-term plans, medium-term plans, and long-term plans. So in short term, what they are saying is like we will be forming a AIGG group, Artificial Intelligence Governance Group. The group will consist like officials from Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Ministry of External Affairs, and other government bodies, basically. And aside from that, we'll also be forming another group that will be TPEC, Technology Expert Policy Committee. They will also be like certain officials from all these ministries will included in that group. Aside from that, a principal scientific advisor to the government of India will also be part of that group. So both of these groups will be like monitoring, okay, what is happening in the AI sphere, where the problem is arising, and they will be recommending certain legal amendments. They will be recommending like, okay, we need to amend these laws, or we, in the long run, they can also recommend that, okay, we have to enact a particular law for this AI sector because it is getting out of hand. So this is what the approach of Indian government like in the long, medium, and short term.
I think that's a really good architecture to kind of keep in mind, because this framework as it currently stands requires expert opinion from various background professionals. Even when we're looking at this panel, it takes 4 of us from relatively different backgrounds to actually reach a forward journey.
Adil, I have a quick question for Devrat on that, right?
Of course.
So, Devrat, there are some clear things that the Indian government can already put in place, right? And the one big thing is, I feel that the big pie in the sky, and everybody in the Silicon Valley is actually talking about GAI, right? General Artificial Intelligence. And which is an acronym for GAI, which is the sacred cow. And I feel that that information, and all of that is based on the quantum of data that you can actually feed into AI systems in order for them to get tangentially better. The question here is that India clearly has data, right? India has, and I think one of our biggest strengths is the number of internet users that we really have. So India's got a lot of data that can actually potentially push that envelope forward. The thing that really comes to mind is, very straightforward. The thing that is at most risk is personally identifiable information, right? Anything that basically is name, personal information, and so on and so forth. That regulation can almost happen immediately. So why aren't we acting at a basic level to ask, the large LLM providers to start to contain basic personal information and to mask that?
So basically, the new Digital Personal and Data Protection Act, it clearly states that you cannot use personal data of an individual to train AI models, right? So the protections are in place. The protections are in place, like unless and until I give explicit consent that, okay, use my data to train your AI models. Companies, they cannot legally do it, basically, and there's also a provision that I can opt out of it. Anytime I choose. Like, if I choose, okay, please don't use my personal data to train your AI systems or train your AI models. Immediately, these AI companies, they have to delete my data, right? Immediately, they have to delete my data. So protections are already in place, like regarding data protection and regarding the personal data of an individual.
And I also want to add, I think, Devrat, the DEPA is also there, the Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture, which is also a consent-based form of authentication of user information. So it's not that we don't have the proper foundation blocks in place. It does take a lot to enforce, no two ways about it. But that is where voluntary self-governance and voluntary self-action also is equally important, just to add to what you're saying, right? So the DPDP, along with the DPI, which is the Digital Public Infrastructure, which has again been built by the India AI guidelines, I mean, they are prescribing that, and working along with the DEPA, right, which is consent authentication at the end of the day. So I think this framework is there. It's just about how to keep the ball rolling, right? And I think that is what this panel is here to discuss today.
I think like it's, the problem is regarding the enforcement, right? We have really great acts, right? It's been like, we are looking after all the things that are currently existing and also the problems that may arise in future. Yeah. But unfortunately, we don't have the proper enforcement mechanism as of now.
So the question that I have is, why do we look for the government to regulate? And this is my question to you, Tariq, right?
So before we go to enforcement, which I think is a really important part of our discussion, I'm really looking forward to it. I just wanted to close the wrap on how we actually see India, utilizing this situation that it's in. And Archana, I know that we actually spoke very extensively on the transparency as a foundation idea. And could you introduce that a little bit more? Could you explain to our audience and to each other how we could actually use that to our advantage?
Definitely, and the audience must excuse me because there's a lot that I have written down, because there's so many updates that are happening as we speak that I think it's very important to elucidate this effectively and to take something away from, something back from this conversation. So let me just clarify this. Mr. Srinath Sridevan was speaking about the 7 sutras from the India AI guidelines. And though transparency is something that is not explicitly laid out, it does roll back into understandable by design, which is one of the sutras of the India AI guidelines. And I see transparency personally as the most practical and the most immediate lever that enterprises can use, considering where India is today. And I'll tell you why. I don't see transparency as a regulatory ideal. I see this mostly as a capacity building tool. See, the biggest difficulty we all face as users or as organizations or even as regulators is information asymmetry. There is no clarity, or I don't believe all of us are on sync in terms of what AI systems are capable of and what outcomes could come out of it. Right? And therefore, I believe you cannot meaningfully, so if we're looking at a regulation today, I don't think we can regulate what we can't see, and we can't govern what we don't understand. And I think transparency is the key, which we can immediately use to unlock this constraint, right? And at this juncture, I think it's very important to also think about how transparency is framed. So the immediate concern, I think in our lead-up conversations also, Tariq, you were worried about what transparency could mean, right? And I was trying to clarify that it is not just about, so again, I'm going back to the guidelines where the government is clarifying, where the MEITY is clarifying. They're not asking you to open up your source codes or to expose your trade secrets. It is not about a data dump system as well, where you just dump. So transparency is not just about data dump. I think it's more about operational legibility right? So give us the information that will help us understand how to regulate better. And I think organizations should start doing that to move towards regulation. So regulation is only the backstop. Now, let me just try and explain transparency in simple words, okay? I'm going to use this healthcare analogy. So think about transparency as your diagnostic tool. Think about an MRI scan or an X-ray. It is going to tell you where the fractures are or where the anomalies in your system are. It's not the treatment, but it allows you to see what is happening inside and helps the doctor further the process, right, in effective treatment. So I think the key here is that transparency helps us see the problem, but it does not help us resolve it. It's just the foundation. I think it's the beginning of where we need to go. And it could form the evidentiary basis for better regulation, a regulation which could be informed and not speculative.
So, Archana, the one thing that I have about the way you're talking about transparency is the explainability of AI.
Exactly. In fact, there are 3 layers to it.
Even the guys who invented it don't know that yet. They really can't explain AI today the way AI is functioning, and
that is the
in
catch.
itself is an issue.
And that's the catch. And we're talking about innovation at speed, right? Now, if you don't have that explainability, if there is a harm, and we are talking about harms at risk, at scale, we are not talking about an individual being affected at this juncture, right? We're talking about mass. Think about the deep fake, right? Unfortunately, that's what hits us straight on the head. I don't think any other issue today is really going to, connect with us. Think about it. And therefore, it's a must. Try. The question is about whether organizations are willing to try. Help the governance. Help the government.
I think that's a really important question, and one thing that I think I'm looking forward to delving into y'all, specifically delving into with y'all tomorrow in our closed door discussion to understand what this barrier of transparency needs to be. And for our audience, something that y'all can look forward to is our policy recommendation later this week that will actually start to mark out more clearly what we recommend in terms of a transparency threshold. Now, kind of segueing into our next section. Now, Archana, you've spoken very passionately about governance by design. It's a product, as I understand it, is a product-led version of self-governance, a techno-legal measure in the eyes of the India AI governance guidelines. Could you explain that a little bit?
I didn't hear the last part of your question.
It seems to me that governance by design is a product approach or a techno-legal approach as the India AI governance guidelines would recommend. Could you delve a little bit into what you see as governance by design as a concept?
Yeah, the first thing I don't want all of us to think about is to look at governance by design as some Western buzzword. That's not what it is, right? It is something that we're very familiar with. It's not something that we don't know in the Indian context. But what it really clarifies is about the conditions under which governance should operate. And let me just explain this. See, start by answering questions of responsibility or accountability or risks before the system is deployed. Don't be reactive. Governance by design simply means start from the place you start designing or planning the system. It should flow along with the entire flow. Your plan, develop, design, implement, all those stages. Go through the life cycle of the AI system, but start right at the top when the plan is formed. It's as simple as that. Now, the reason is there is a big difference between AI. By now, I think all of us are aware of it. I just have to bring it up to the table that AI systems behave very differently from traditional systems, and I think all of us agree with that. Traditional software is nowhere close to AI. I think most of the founders who spoke on the previous panels were very clear about this, right? So if governance enters as an afterthought, it becomes reactive. So there is no point of having explanations after harm, audits after the system has been deployed, or facing any kind of compliance exercises, which are actually totally disconnected from decision making. So your governance by design is going to tell you when human judgment is very important, human in the loop. It's going to tell you who is going to take the onus when harm occurs, and what is the responsibility of trying to contain the harm. So all that we are saying is don't be reactive. Start right at the beginning, and I think governance by design is not a compliance checkbox. It's not a checklist, it's not a one-time activity, right? It's a very voluntary form of governance that deployers and developers and anybody in the AI acting system could actually take up to support. So the way I look at it, transparency is your bedrock. Build the governance by design on top of that, right? So I think this is, again, I'll go back to my healthcare analogy for a bit because it's just connecting, right? So you're thinking about a diagnostic tool like an MRI scan. Think about governance by design like your treatment plan, right? The doctor makes a treatment plan before he actually starts performing any medical miracles on us, right?
Yeah, and I think that actually throws me back to the earlier conversation where Yoga Balaji actually spoke about making sure your systems fail safely. Because they are designed to fail.
They're designed to fail.
They will fail at some point, but making sure that the collateral that comes out of that is not too bad. That's important.
If I can just explain what the AI governance framework actually mean by understandable by design. Basically, to implement governance mechanisms when you are actually creating the AI system before it is actually deployed. So that is what they mean when using the word understandable by design. I can give a very short example. For example, if you are creating a image generation AI system, right? So as soon as the AI is generating any image in response to a prompt, for example, any prompt is given generate an image of a cat. If AI is generating that image, the image will be watermarked, basically C2PA style watermarked. So this is one example of understandable by design.
That's actually really helpful because I think the transparency of it comes out in a different angle. Tariq, I know that you're probably sitting there thinking these lawyers are kind of slowing down my innovation. I just want to build things and get better. How do you see our conversation on governance by design kind of affecting your business?
I think I had this conversation with Archana a little earlier. I feel governance by design is just as simple as good governance, right? So if you want a good government, what is it that you need when you want a good government governing you? It's not just a set of regulations, but it's the right people behind the implementation of those regulations. That means you need good governors, you need good people, you need good value systems. Am I not speaking into the mic?
No. I was going to say something. Please proceed.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So I think you need to depend on value systems and making sure that the right people are in the right places in order to implement, mindful deployment or ethical deployment of AI, especially in the legal space, right? So you talked about healthcare several times. So the disasters that can happen on the in the legal space could be disastrous for a corporate entity or an individual, even worse, right? For an individual where, there could be a travesty of justice or injustice that can happen. And at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to avoid when it comes to the legal space, is injustice in any form, right? That's the worst case scenario that can happen. So how do you stop that, right? It's got to be mindful. And I'm a big believer in value-based people being in the right place, especially in the implementation stage.
No, Adil, I also want to be able to incentivize this for the entrepreneurs, right? If I may. Please. Because post our conversation, I was actually thinking about what is the incentive? Because the fear of the enterprises or the entrepreneurs is right in a way. This should not be a restraint over innovation, right? It cannot pull us back. I think all of us agree. I don't think the lawyer bunch is always about putting roadblocks out there, right? Because I am largely in-house. I'm a corporate lawyer, so I want to push it forward. So there are three things that come to mind to incentivize the governance by design. One is that it reduces your uncertainty, which means if your system boundaries and your decision authority is kind of defined upfront, it's easier to explain outcomes, point one. Point two, it protects the decision makers because you're clear about your trade-offs. As soon as you build your system, you're clear about where you're giving, there's no system built without trade-offs, right? And that's the second one. And the third one is it is definitely going to enable scale because it is easier to explain to regulators or your partners or to your customers, right? So there is definitely a commercial and an operational advantage, even before regulation closes in. And I think that's the side that organizations should largely see today in terms of adopting governance by design.
I think that makes sense and also ties really well into our next conversation on liability and accountability. Now, a governance by design program helps explain, as I understand it, to a regulator that you've taken good measures to kind of do no harm. So, Tariq, I'm going to pick your brain a little bit and ask you a really lawyery question, and I apologize in advance for it. If you are in a situation where your product creates harm, who bears the risk? Should it be the foundational model? Should it be the deployer? Or should it be the user who went through with the system's recommendation?
So I'm going to answer your question in two parts, right? When you talk about error margins, right? So humanity has historically anything that is mechanized, that has robotics do something, or computers do something, we demand 100% compliance. What was the benchmark? What was the human error before AI started to do? We really don't have those benchmarks, right? So today, what we're really looking at is 100% accuracy for AI at initial deployment, and that's not really going to happen. It's very similar to, so you benchmark saying if today is, in certain use cases, we're seeing AI give us 80% accuracy. What was the benchmark earlier before, right? Was it, when it was being done by humans, was there a 40% accuracy? Well, 80 is better than 40, but everybody's looking at the 20% error margin and saying, hey, listen, you know what, there is a 20% error margin. But the fact that we've got 40% increase in accuracy in a particular use case through the use of AI is not being considered. So number one, I think the human error margins haven't been benchmarked. So for us to say that we really need to just focus on the errors that AI is making is, I think, a fallacy at this stage, right? So it's going to be incremental gain. The second thing is in terms of distribution of liability, and liability in and itself is like who's responsible. At the end of the day, I think if all the parties concerned are knowledgeable about the dangers of using technology, then I think it's the last point in the chain. The ultimate person who actually deploys that technology in real use cases, as long as they are aware of the dangers, I think the liability should end at that point in time, at the deployment level, which is really counterintuitive for me because we as a company end up deploying AI all the time, which means that at the end of the day, we need to recognize the dangers of AI before we deploy it in real-time scenarios.
I think that's really interesting because on the one hand, I think we're actually agreeing upon a governance by design system helping that scenario offset the liability. I also think that, Archana, maybe you'll agree with me as someone that's advised technology companies in the past, that's where the contractual paradigm kind of comes in. You kind of educate your customers that this could potentially be a risk and we aren't taking it.
That's right.
Yeah. So I have two fun situations to kind of talk about accountability and liability on. So Devra, this one's for you. When we look at the major social media platforms of the world, they're using algorithms to feed you content that you really want to consume, that you're pre-tuned to want to consume, let's say. Doesn't this create a polarization situation where you are driven further into your own potentially critical views? And should we not kind of be looking at this with some level of scrutiny?
Yes, I definitely agree with that. Like the kind of content that we consume over social media, right? And obviously, the kind of content that are being shown to us by these social media companies are based on collection of our personal data, right? If I'm interacting more with the right-wing posts, they will keep continue showing me right-wing post. If I'm interacting with left-wing post, same. So what actually happens is that I lose my critical thinking, right? I'm not gonna think critically, I'm not gonna do my own research. Basically, I'm just gonna consume that content, and I'm either gonna be like extremely left-wing or extremely right-wing. So this is the problem that is currently with the social media, basically. Now, in order to prevent this, as of now, we don't have any specific laws. But if we look at the EU AI Act, basically, in EU, they have GDPR, obviously, that prohibits collection of personal data, right? Your religion, your caste, or which political affiliation you are associated with. So there, we have in EU, there is regulation. In India, currently, we don't have any such kind of things.
Makes sense. And I think, Archana, this one's kind of for you. And it takes the question to Devrat a little bit further. We're living in an age where you have polarization occurring through automated algorithms, and you have the potential for synthetic content to kind of make that a lot worse. And I think the most recent realization of this is through the whole lack of guardrails that Elon Musk's company has built into Grok. Do you think that we should be addressing this a lot more proactively than we are currently?
That's an interesting question, and I want to elaborate on this a little more because it's kind of not just India which has been hit by this. This is a global concern as far as the Grok's AI chatbot is concerned. For the benefit of the audience, so I'm sure all of us are aware of this, but then this is relating to deepfakes, and it is about creating images without consent, using this chatbot. And Elon Musk has very cleverly evaded this by putting the blame on the user, which is what I think we were touching upon a little time back. But I think this really forces us to see the hard truth about AI liability, this episode that has happened, right? And it is that harm at scale rarely has a single cause, right? So placing the blame on the user is definitely incomplete. If you see synthetic content failure, like Tariq pointed out, he made a chain of people, and that's the users or the actors in the scene, right? So synthetic content failure doesn't just stop with the user or start with the user. It sits at the intersection of system design, of platform responsibility, and also the user. So placing the liability or accountability on any one actor in this whole schema of things is not the solution to it. Therefore, what I really see is, let's just delve. So there was a recent development that that I read about this Grok AI issue, and about how, interestingly, different different countries have handled it in a different fashion. And we didn't get to really delve into the global scenario, but just look at this. We are talking about UK, which is largely principle-based. And they have overtly applied a lot of political pressure to make Grok back down, right? That is one way of handling it. The US is still waiting for some kind of litigation to happen, and then they're going to go and hit, right? The EU very predictably has taken the benefit of their Digital Services Act, their legislation, and they're asking for document retention. And they're creating an evidentiary base because they are very clear that systematic risk is existent, is the problem, right? So look at the three dimensions and look at where India is sitting. And I think this is where, and in response to this, it's very interesting to see what Elon Musk has actually done, right? Grok has actually now restricted that particular mode. It's called the Spice mode, to only paying subscribers. It's a paid version now. So what happens is, it is not in any way reducing the capability or capacity of that tool. It is shifting the accountability and liability to individual users indirectly.
Further monetizing it makes more money for Elon Musk.
Look at this, yeah. In
And,
fact, ensuring traceability of those individuals, right? Your
and-
payment gateways and so on and so forth.
And the biggest issue that's coming out of this is data integrity, right? The integrity of the data we're consuming. And I think that issue really needs to be addressed head on. If anything, the biggest problem with AI is data integrity. What is the integrity of the data that you're actually looking at? What is AI generated? What is human generated? right?
Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, I mean, not only garbage in, garbage out. So you're talking about AI efficiency. I'm talking about AI integrity. I'm talking about what data is AI generated and what data is human generated, and to be able to distinguish between the two. You know, that is probably the biggest data issue that I think we should be solving. across the
So
board.
it's basically like the same thing that we have previously discussed, right? Watermarking. If that's synthetic data, the moment it gets generated through a system, in that instance, it should be watermarked, right? And like,
I mean, there's some operational issues, like you can copy the text, right? So it's not producing a PDF every time. It's not producing an image every time. But I'm just talking about even text, even like actual answers that AI is generating. You can copy and paste that, right? How do you create data integrity issues? Now they're developing AI to identify AI-generated data.
That sounds
yeah,
expensive.
so the same thing is happening, right? Like, I understand like there are a lot of juniors here, like they might be applying for the jobs in the next couple of years. So what the companies, particularly HRs, they started to do was they recruited this ATS system, right? Because they don't have time to sort all of these resumes. Now the candidates, they are also starting to use the same thing. Like, okay, if my resume is scoring more than 80% in the ATS, then I'll apply for the job. So like candidates are also using AI to make the resumes. HRs are also using AI to like select
And
the resumes.
positive of all this is I haven't seen a resume with a spelling mistake in the last 6 months.
Okay, so I think as we kind of go down that road, and I think that it's clear, and it's quite clear that we need regulation for this. And I think I'll close this conversation with one question to you, Tariq. Is it really that, can we actually put an indelible watermark on things other than text? I know text is probably the hardest part here, but maybe an image or a video.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's mandatory. And I think there's metadata. You really don't even need a watermark across the image, right?
Yeah.
You just need metadata to let us know that, hey, listen, this is AI generated, and systems that access it automatically, identify what is an AI generated image. And I think that might just solve the problem. But I think that needs to be regulated. That really needs to be mandated, regulated. And I think when people are consuming this data, they need to know. That the biggest thing is not just at the generation point, but at the consumption point. So when people are looking at AI-generated data, they should be informed that this is AI-generated data.
Interesting. And so kind of opening up towards the end of our conversation. So one thing that I've kind of noticed, and something that we touched upon when we were talking to Mr. Sridevan, was India has over 900 million internet users. We're a huge data market. I know that the AI India mission is to make AI in India and making AI work for India. Are we doing that enough? Are we utilizing the potential that we have today?
Yes, basically if you look at the 7 pillars of India mission, like startup financing, future skills, safe and trusted, and so it is clear that the government is putting a lot of funding in India AI mission. And obviously when we are talking about 900 million of internet users, we have to understand that this data is not ready for AI use. It's a raw data. For an AI system to use particular data, it has to be like annotated, curated. So this is a raw data, it's a scrapped data. So it will take some time. It will we have to refine that data, and then eventually we'll put that data into our systems, and government is working towards creating their own foundation model, which will be similar to, I think, ChatGPT or Grok. But it will take some time.
That makes sense. I think the mission to kind of build out data sets that can be used for the market is a really good initiative, and I wonder how this will unfold. Please.
I just have a follow-on question. So it's not just about the data, it's also about the proprietary model that India can create, right? So basically what happens is we're not necessarily training OpenAI, but we're training India's own proprietary model based on India's own data, right? So I think that's probably the two levels. One thing is, yes, the sacred cow of all of this is data. So we've got data. We've got over 1 billion users right now that are, generating all kinds of data, structured, unstructured data. So there's huge volumes that we have access to as a country. Number two is feeding that to build our own proprietary model that is trained on user behavior here. And I think, like I said, based on everything that I'm at least understanding, that general artificial intelligence will eventually come with the magnitude of data that we can actually use to train. And obviously, all this requires resources, which means that it's easier said than done, right? The moment we say all this needs to happen and all this data needs to be processed, then you need the infrastructure costs and then the budget to actually be allocated to something like this, which means that we have to bet as a country that this is going to be extremely valuable for us in order to get ahead of the tech race. So I think it really comes from that vision of saying that, hey, listen, this is a commodity and an asset that can actually get us globally ahead and globally recognized, just because if we can create our own proprietary model that is trained on our own data, then you can have those kind of budgets, because it takes an enormous amount of money right now to be able to run all this.
Yeah, basically, so I think like one of the roadblocks to this foundation model is AI chips. Basically, we know that India, if we compare India to China in the semiconductor market or the creation of semiconductor chips, India is lacking behind, right? We have to import most of the things. So yes, I think like this is one of the roadblocks, that in the hardware part we are lacking behind, and if we can solve this as a nation, like if we are able to develop our own semiconductors, I think like we can go really far.
I think the secret recipe is talent, chips, and data. Interesting. So coming to our segment on enforcement and implementation. Now, one thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about, Devrat, is now we're talking about a bunch of groups being set up under the India AI governance guidelines. How are these going to kind of work? You have the AI governance group, the Technology and Policy Expert Committee, and the AI Safety Institute. Could you shed some light?
So basically, as of now, this India AI governance is going to adopt a multi-layer governance approach. So at the top, we'll be having AIG, Artificial Intelligence Governance Group, AIGG, basically. The next will be TPEC, Technology Policy Experts Group. And the third will be, I think, AI Safety Institute. So most of the power will be given to AIGG. Basically, as I think already explained, it will consist of members from MIT, MEA, other regulatory bodies across India. The second will be like, it will be headed by the principal scientific advisor to the government of India, basically. And the third will be like an AI Safety Institute, basically. I think like Indian government has already released a publication regarding the same. And in, I think this year or the next year, it will come into existence. So the main function of AI Safety Institute will be to like look after this AI safety, do research on this, provide these sandboxes, regulatory sandboxes to the companies so that they can like deploy their AI system at a very small scale and like conduct research. Okay, this is the problem that we are facing. So AI Safety Institute will be like collaborating with a lot of companies in this year or the next years.
Do you think sandboxes work?
I think it's a great idea. I think we should basically lay out large enterprise-grade sandboxes for everybody to play with. And the sandboxes work, for sure. And I think sandboxes allow us to examine how AI is working, how the data is being processed, and really the end use cases are also being monitored. So actually if we actually have a staging environment, I think that'd be great.
Archana, I want to kind of touch upon talent a bit more because we're looking at enforcement through these three member bodies, but I wonder if that's going to be enough. Do we need more industrial knowledge as well? Do we need to understand and ensure that these governing bodies have enough understanding of the systems?
Absolutely, and that's one takeaway that I would really, look into for in the EU AI Act, because it mandates AI literacy. I know the India guidelines do touch upon it, right? It is lined up as a capacity builder, if I'm not wrong, or an enabler, I'm not sure. But I think AI literacy is a must for anybody. It's not just about people who are in the developer segment or the regulators, it is for the users as well, right? Getting to know more about it, and I think the initiative has to come first from the government on providing these literacy programs. Considering that this is an animal that we have not faced before, right? I think it's very, very important that AI literacy be mandated, if at all. Anything needs to be mandated.
Yeah, so basically inside India, India AI mission, we have 7 pillars, right? So one of the pillars is future skills. It's basically the capacity building pillar, where a lot of data labs are being opened across India, right? In tier 2 and tier 3 cities, all is being funded by MIT itself. And here, once these data labs are open, students across India, they can come there and get trained on this data curation, data annotation courses free of cost for the next 3 years. So this, I think, is a really good initiative. Aside from that, under India AI mission, we also have UA AI. Basically, the courses which are framed under this UA AI, anyone can watch it. You don't need to have a technical background, right? It's like explaining AI in a very simple way, so that even a layman can understand. People who are not from legal or technical background, they can also understand. So government is working towards this. They are aware that, okay, this is the problem that, that we are facing right now, and eventually it will rise if we don't do anything.
That's really good to hear, actually. I haven't heard of this before. Thank you for that.
Neither have I. How soon is this coming up, or is this already live?
Actually, UA for AI is live. You can access it right now. If you search UA for AI in the portal, you can access all the courses. It's free of cost. And regarding the data labs, right now, formalities are being done, MOUs are being signed. And I think in this year, some labs will open, and in the next 3 years, I think they will eventually catch up to 570 labs. What was their target?
This is one of the previous, speakers asked everybody, how many of you know your human rights? Raise your hands. It's so I think it's really important. Just to bring perspective, I think we have 1 billion, I think it's crossed 1 billion internet users in India today in the last 30 years. I think 95, right? When BSNL launched its first internet hub. Anyway, so I think it's roughly around 30 years that we've gotten 1 billion users. And we're probably going to hit 1 billion users and probably AI usage, whether they know it or not, in year 1.
So it's literacy about AI literacy. No.
Yeah, so all I'm saying is the impetus for this population to understand what they're using. And I think that's why I said it's not just at the generation stage, but I think the education really needs to be at the consumption stage as well.
Absolutely. I think that it is really a self-driven program, isn't it? You do have to actually take the effort to do this, even though the benefits are astronomical. So I have 2 kind of all-panel questions to wind up our session. If we looked for a strong transparency regulation, Tariq, would enterprise benefit?
I absolutely think so. Nobody understands how their AI systems are working. A lot of folks, and I've been working in legal tech for 20 years, a lot of end users within the legal space do not understand the technology and what's happening. So greater transparency, I think, is fantastic. But for people to understand what this transparency means is another step, right? Okay, making all of this information available is one thing, but to make it explainable is, I think, a difficult task and is a difficult step. So transparency and explainability, I think is a hurdle even on the technology side. I'm just not talking about the consumer side. So I think there's work to be done there before. So when you talk about transparency, I'm assuming you mean explainability of the AI.
To a large extent. And I think, Archana, maybe you'll agree with me, and I'll ask you this question in a different flavor. But if you hit a black box issue, would good governance by design also require you to just say, I don't know what happens behind this wall? Does that level of transparency actually solve the problem to a
Absolutely.
large
In
extent?
fact, being transparent about what you're not clear about, what you don't know today, is also transparency. It's
So-
just about stating what it is to help the whole system move forward, because I think we're stuck here. This scene of uncertainty is what is probably stopping us from moving forward. And if we want innovation first without restraint, this is the way out. And all of us are players here. It's just not about the government.
Agreed. And I think that you kind of answered my question to you in that sense, because I think it definitely helps implementation, doesn't it? Just implementing good governance. If you have the information you need for good governance, and I guess this is for both of you all on enterprise level, on the governance level, transparency would help that agenda, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it will help, but I will slightly disagree with that, right? It looks good on paper, like we are talking about transparency, okay, this will be good, we are finally able to understand, okay, how this AI is arriving at a particular decision, why it chose certain outcome, right? It's good. But do we have the power? Do we have the power to say to OpenAI, kindly explain your model?
It's a good question.
What kind of data are you using to train your model?
I think
Do
that's
we have the
why
power?
the Indian government needs to build its proprietary model.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's what the Indian government is currently working on.
Enforcement is always the question. There's no two ways about it.
Okay.
We have to start somewhere.
And then make it transparent.
Exactly.
My last question, and I will not trouble you with transparency anymore. If you had
Please.
one regulation, one rule, not transparency, that you can require from the government to implement today to make AI a better, safer space for you, what would that be?
So basically, since I've been working with them for a long time, I know the ground reality, so I'll not be asking way too much. It's not like Christmas. But I think something they can work towards is the National AI Registry, National AI Harms Registry, basically. Right now, we don't know what kind of problems these AI systems are causing in different sectors, like in finance, in healthcare, in agriculture, in education, in as previous panels have already given example, in while giving loan, etc. So, in order to make right regulations, in order to make the perfect policy or governance guidelines for the future, we need to collect that data. Right? We need to collect that data, assess it, analyze it, and based on the outcomes of those data, we have to amend certain sections of existing laws, or I think enact a whole new AI law. So I think this is something that is feasible. This is something towards Indian government can work right now.
Ashna, do you want to go next?
Yeah. I think what works best for us today is the fact that we have the guidelines. It is definitely a good document to use as a base. We should be endeavoring to make this a working document. But how do we operationalize this? We need an enforcement, for forcing enforcement, right? Today, that's the stage we are in, unfortunately. Literacy
Yeah,
for literacy,
subcommittee for the
enforcement for
subcommittee.
enforcement. And therefore, what I would propose is that a mandatory AI governance readiness standard, okay, aligning with these guidelines, something like a playbook. A sectoral playbook is also fine. If you want to go by the sector, right? I'm not getting into that. The bottom line is hand out playbooks or some kind of standard, mandatory standard that organizations have to look into, fill in, right? So it will be based on the 7 sutras and the risks, right? Mapping the risks. And we have a technology stack. Let's build an AI governance stack and have the organizations checkbox it, right? Start with AI literacy, transparency, governance by design. essentially to fill the void of, I don't even see that there is a need for an omnibus regulation today, if you ask me. Right? I think the other speakers have also said something like that, very similar. I don't see the need for that. What do we do in the interim is where I'm coming from. So I think the government should definitely mandate something like an AI governance readiness standard, something like a playbook for all organizations.
Yeah, I have just a follow-up question to you, like based on a response given by Archana. Basically, if government makes it like mandatory, and like if the company is not following these standards or these mandates, we are going to penalize you heavily. So what is your opinion on that?
I think, so I'll answer your question. The moment that becomes law. If you don't follow law, you're illegal. The answer is right there. As long as it's jurisdictionally approved and it becomes a part of, the legal system, then I don't think companies have a choice. That's number one, right? So you need to, there are ways, there's a process that you need to follow. So I think as long as you make it law, why not, right? So I think.
Yes, exactly. But what I wanted to understand is what effect it will like have on your business, like if you're like creating something related with AI system.
So, like I said, there are certain things I am really worried about. I'm worried about the amount of personally identifiable information that exists today in AI systems. I feel that a lot of companies just don't follow those regulations. There is enough and more data that's being uploaded randomly into AI systems, into open source systems. Even if OpenAI is saying, lots of fine print, nobody really is reading that fine print. There's a lot of legalities associated with it. So there's a lot of individual data that's being uploaded right now. So my biggest concern is that it's already there. And I think some of that really has to be regulated. Is it going to slow down innovation to some extent? So I'll answer Adil's question also as well. I feel that if there was one thing that can be done to regulate this is at the point of generation is to flag the data that could be problematic and have that being reported back to the regulatory authorities, right? So instead of being reactionary and saying that we need to collect all the data that is coming out of the AI systems, flag the data that can be problematic, flag the data that is what you feel is violating certain norms, and have that under further scrutiny. So subset the data, send that out there, be proactive, create legislation. As long as that's there, I think people will learn to still accelerate within those guidelines. The guidelines have to be meaningful. They shouldn't become onerous, right? You cannot have a bunch of bureaucrats pass guidelines. You need to have AI practitioners, industry folk who can understand exactly what is the balance. And everything in life is about balance. It's not about a bunch of policymakers who don't understand exactly industry standards who are creating those guidelines, and then you can't have the industry guys who's like, all I want to do is make money, so don't stop me. So it's got to be a balance between the two, and I think the balance is what you really need to identify.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I think that kind of brings us to a close to our discussion. I think that playbooks are important. I think that maybe slamming fines for not following them today may not be the right solution, but we do still need to
I think it's more about just one point that I want to make. Legislation is again going to take time, right? We want to avoid that. We want to have the basis of capitalizing on what we already have, and those are existing laws. I'm just saying that the guidelines work fine, right? To start off with. When we're talking about standard, it's only going to, if you don't comply, it's only going to slow down your innovation, and that's the best ticket to hold back. Why are you thinking of penalizing and going into another elaborative law, which would again create a void, right? How long do we wait for the law to come into force, right? See, the guidelines are there. Do something that's also productive in that way, right? Restrain the innovation. Innovation over restraint goes off.
Yes, but basically if guidelines are mandatory, we have to come with a certain way that they are enforced, right? If I'm saying, okay, this is mandatory, so if a particular company or organization, if they're not following it, I should penalize them, right? Or how can I say that, okay, this is mandatory? If there's no penalization, then it is voluntarily.
It's like a clearance. It's like a license clearance. You don't get your license to move forward.
That's penalizing.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah.
Like you can like
It's a complex problem. I think that maybe the right solution is to look at it as a liability mitigating fashion, say that I tried my best, at least you don't get, at the end of the risk tunnel, when something actually goes wrong, at least you have an answer for it, and that's good governance. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adil.
This
Thanks,
was great.
guys.
Thank you for panelists. I had a blast. Thank you. Thank you, audience.
Thank you, panel, for elaborately discussing certain pressing topics in respect of AI, such as liability, enforcement mechanisms, and regulations. May I request the panelists here? As we bring today's program to a close, may I also request Adil to hand over the mementos to the panelists. May I now request Durga Bhatt to deliver the vote of thanks.
Well, this brings us and brings a close to the event which we've been putting together for the last 3 months. So please bear with me. It's a pretty long list that I have to go through. It's an absolute privilege and my pleasure to be giving this vote of thanks on behalf of Peritum Partners and to the people at Peritum Partners. Of course, I am not too well equipped in the subject matter for me to say that the sessions were really great, and I feel like personally they were really enriching and I've learned a lot. So the quality of dialogue, of course, was I think each of us, at least I speak for myself, that I leave this place as an audience learning something more about the law, the policy, and the governance around AI. Now, starting with the list of thank yous is, of course, our speakers and our moderators, our speakers and panelists, Mr. Suresh, Mr. Vineet, Mr. Ravi, Mr. Suren, Mr. Sudarshan, Mr. Arun, Mr. Yoga Balaji, Mr. Srinath Devan, Mr. Tariq, Mr. Devdrat, and Ms. Archana. And a big shout out to our moderators, Karthik, Adil, and Kirti. I guess you guys have really held you have really held the space very well. And thank you so much for putting the intellectual framework around the panels to what we witnessed today in the last 2 months, for putting it together. Thank you so much for that. Our event sponsors, thank you to Standard Chartered and to Mr. Bala and Mr. Deepak for being here. Also our ecosystem partners and collaborators, Tamilpreneur, Bluemain, Fiki Flow, Fiki, Bunji, and Akshayam. Thank you so much for your encouragement and support. I think as first-time event organizers, 3 months back what seemed like a Herculean task. I think I can say that this morning when I entered, it seemed like, okay, the job is done. Now the rest is just going to follow. So thank you so much, last and not the least, to the audience for patiently being here and taking your time out on a Saturday morning. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope we hope that you take something away from what we try to put together here today. Of course, last but not the least is the members of Peritum. Thank you so much to each and every one of you. Karthik, Adil, Varlakshmi, Siraj, Asima, Sarthak, Anish, Sandeep. Special shout out to these folks because they have been the backbone of this entire event since the start, and this event wouldn't have happened if not for their support. To all our other members of the firm, thank you so much for extending your support from time to time, and I'm leaving here today with new perspectives and hopefully some meaningful connections that I've made. Thank you so much for being here, and have a good day. Thank you.